So the other day, I showed you I was using a multimeter for my lawnmower repair hobby business. I was testing a ignition coil for resistance. So I was using the ohms meter on the multimeter. The reason I have a multimeter is because I own solar panels, and since this is an off-grid channel, I thought it would be a good idea to follow up, because like I said, somebody asked, how do you even use a multimeter? He said, I own one, but I don't know, something like gibberish. I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting. It's gibberish to me. Could you spin a video, a partial bit video, explaining how it works? Well, actually, it's a brilliant idea, and I wish I'd have thought of it myself. I have two sets of solar panels running into one battery bank. I have 6 solar panels going into one charge controller, 6 solar panels go into a separate charge controller, and both charge controllers go into 12 batteries, a battery bank. And those 12 batteries power the house. So when I have a problem with a solar panel, which happens occasionally, wires get corroded, something happens, you know, it's hard telling. A lot of things can happen. Well, you know, wire gets cut. The charge controller will tell me what set of panels are bad, because like I said, I have 2 charge controllers. So one charge controller is doing great at 24 amps, the other one's not doing any, you know, it's lost 5 amps or 4 amps or something like that. So you know at least where to look, you know, which 6 you can start to look at. And what you do is you turn all 6 of those solar panels over. That drops all the amperage out of it. And then you pick one up at a time, and you should see 5 amps, you set it back down, 5 amps, set it back down, 5 amps, set it back down, 0 amps. Oh, there's the panel. That's the one I'm having problems with. So then you got to figure out what's wrong with it. And in some cases, it's not quite as clear. You know, it's not a cut wire, or, you know, something's just, everything looks good. So you get the multimeter out, and you can start checking for voltage of that particular panel. Just disconnect it from the system, and you start working with it, seeing where the loose connection is, because you got different connections throughout the wiring. You got a wire hooked up to the panel itself. You got a wire connection that connects it to the charge controller. You got extension wire. And any of those fittings, or even the wire itself, can go bad. So you might need to pull out the multimeter. So when I'm looking at solar panels, for example, I know my solar panels can go up to 21 volts. Even though it's a 12 volt system, my panel itself can go up to 21 volts. So we got to kind of look at the multimeter to determine what we want to do. Now, you kind of get an idea. Some multimeters give you more information than this one. This one doesn't really tell you if it's AC or DC. So you can play around with it and figure it out. But the white numbers, here and here, you got 200, 300, 300, 220, 2, and then you got 200 milli. That is voltage. Here you'll see voltage, 1.5, 9 volt. That's for battery. So you start getting some indication maybe with the battery. Oh, that's DC. So anyway, what I do is I take, for solar panels, over to 200 volts. And then I can test my solar panels without exceeding the capacity of the multimeter, because my solar panels are 21 volts. But if I wanted to test a car battery, well, a car battery isn't going to go over 14 volts. So I can drop it down to 20. So here I have a lawnmower battery. It's actually a motorcycle battery, but they also fit in push mowers, walk behinds, and some generators. And I can test this battery and I don't know if you can see it. I'll lift it up, maybe you can see it. You should be able to read 13.01 volts. So now we know that's DC voltage, at 13, so that's a pretty good battery at 13 volts. So like I said, you have 2, 20, 200, 300 DC. Then over here on this side you have AC. And if you get it backwards, I just checked to make sure it doesn't hurt it. If you get it backwards and you get confused, if you plug DC, so you have it set up to DC, and you put this in your outlet of your house for AC, it doesn't hurt the meter, but it won't read anything. So you bring it over here, and then you put this into the outlet of your house, and it'll tell you what the voltage of your house is. Again, you want the meter higher than the voltage of your house. So you know your house is 110, 120 volts. So you can put it on 200 and it won't exceed it. This is good here also because I have inverters that I run for my solar panels from the batteries. The inverter inverts DC electric from the battery to AC electric into the house. And a lot of times my inverters just start malfunctioning. So I can see if it's producing enough volts. And then you get into amps. And here's what I'm going to tell you about amps. Don't mess with it for batteries or your house, because you're going to overdo it. There's too many amps in a battery and in a house for your meter to read. Because here we have 200 milliamps, 20 milliamps, and then I don't even know what that one reads. I'm not sure. So, but if you're testing your solar panels, a lot of time with the solar panels, you can read the voltage. You'll hook it up to voltage. So you got it over here at 200 volts DC, and it shows 21 volts. But you bring it over to amps, bring it over to 10 amps, because each panel is only 5 amps. So you won't overdo your multimeter. You put it on there and it reads 0. That means that you have a corroded wire, most likely. It's not producing any amps. You're getting plenty of volts, but no amps. And in order to have wattage, you got to have volts times amps. So let's just say 20 volts times 5 amps is 100 watts. So you have a 100 watt panel. That's how you could test your solar panels, is with the DC volts and amps. And then if you need to test your inverter, you test AC volts. Now, like I was telling you with the ohms, you have 200 ohms, and so you have your ohms. It's like the omega symbol here. So ohms is resistance. Now, a lot of things have resistors in them. Now, I have never used the ohms meter for anything other than when I owned a train track. You know, I used to have a hobby of doing train tracks, and I had resistors that I put into LED lights. Well, I knew how much voltage the LED lights needed, but I didn't know what the resistor size was. I mean, they have it all diagrammed out. Different color stripes means different resistance, and that's how much it drops your voltage down. That's what a resistor does, reduces voltage. So I used to use this for my train track. But other than that, I don't use it except to test ignition coils. And so the other day I showed you that I was looking for the resistance of the ignition coil. You want to, and I'm not going to explain to you how an ignition coil works. There's 2 windings in it of copper, and the copper is insulated. And if the insulation starts to degrade and it grounds out, so you have 2 windings of copper, and the insulation breaks, they start touching each other, you'll lose your resistance. So on the other hand, you can gain too much resistance because the wire is going bad, the copper wire. So here I tested resistance. I need to explain the meter more. I didn't do that. So there I went through each number. 200 ohms, 2,000 ohms, and 20,000 ohms. Well, 8,000, that's what that was. 8.7. So 8 is bigger than 2,000. So 8.7 thousand. So 8,700 ohms is what it was, the resistance. So that shows you that the 200, it wouldn't register with 200 because there was too much resistance. It didn't register with 2,000 ohms because it was too much resistance. With 20,000, it did fine. Now, if I took it up to 200, it would be the same. Still get the same reading because it's 0 to 200,000 ohms. You can read it. 2 million ohms. Then it starts getting in decimal places, simply because there's not enough room on the meter to measure it. So this is a pretty advanced course for solar panels, something that you may or may not want to do, but at least it gives you an indication of what your solar panels are doing. So if you can just remember DC and you put it on 20, you can test your voltage on DC and you can test your amperage on your solar panels. You can also play with it in your wall. Put it into your socket, your wall socket. Of course, be safe. Don't touch the metal probes. And if you have a furnace, I used this once for a furnace. We had a furnace that it just wouldn't kick on. So I hooked up the voltage meter to it, and it showed that it wasn't getting enough volts. What had happened was the screw came loose from the breaker box. It was too loose. That was it. So it does help you identify problems. It's a nice tool. It makes you understand electricity better if you play with it. So if you click this up next box, it'll take you to that video where I was testing the resistance and I changed that ignition coil. So hope I can inspire you to learn electric so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.